A biting frost envelops you under the cover of darkness. This body-soul is but a drifting ember in the void, fading into a reverse neon river of disarray. Your nerves struggle to animate the corpse in which you live. There's nothing but stillness located in your chest, a silence that promises far more subtle shades of pain, echoing its phantom intention into the distant future. History
and destiny
thus collide, for fate is made by walking its path, heaven is sustained by earth, yet the present tense is all too familiar, safe and welcoming in its own cruelty. Tracing lines of infinite possibility, this body-soul is scarred and torn, wretched mockery of once
pure design.
Every symbol carved onto your flesh obtains great meaning, but their magnitude escapes you. So you arise, subject to neurochemical overdrive. A violent island wave completes your new existence. The spasms and tremors imprint life. You are never more present than now, when enveloped in mystifying horror. With no more guidance than brute stimuli and carnage, you relent to the treacherous path before you.
All of this has happened before, yet need not happen again.
One must discard the strain of mortality, reset and display
anger sequences,
conceived in reversed neural patterns of hate.
You! What is it that brings you here? Have you come to see firsthand the misery you have wrought? Perhaps in death I still hold some shred of use for you, my love.
Far too much is contained in a name. One need not posit Plato's naturalness of names to accept this. Even a nominalist feels the overbearing strain of textual reality. In knowing the name of your person, or in knowing what it should become, a meditative focusing point is created around your selfhood. You establish a reference with which to guide the way, a blazing torch chasing existential shadows out from the eternal night. One may name many things, obtaining power and purpose with each act performed. It is a way to legislate values and to tie your deeds to them. A name does not require a definition or even a consistent mark of content. It only needs to possess an entirely sui generis being. We are not interested in creating or solving philosophical issues here, instead to use them as an aesthetic lens by which we can mythologize our darkest dreams. A tool of cynicism and cruelty, the Nameless One dare not dream. His lies stay unspoken, leveled on an aether lacking all foundation. With hope comes another fall, another reset, another visit to madness and dismay. There are agonies the body can bear, even as the mind has long forgotten them. The Nameless One dare not count even his scars. Many are his sins, and equal his penance. With pride comes regret. With that just-spoken description comes a facile oversimplification. Many X's draw an inferential line to our Y's, but it is in this rich plurality of statements that we arrive at the monism of truth. In its wake, you hold the kernel of reality in your hands, scalping the surrealist mountain, possessed in your mind's eye, upward and over trauma core imagery. At the peak of your potential, you survey the horizon of winter's barking breath. Echoing the faceless, these lonesome footsteps steal only your burden. Such is the curse of immortality. Having died countless times, every aggregate taste of death brings him closer to total dissolution. If the Nameless One does not come to know himself, he will surely lose himself, wandering through the haze of madness for all eternity. For a man who has all the time in the world, the clock is certainly ticking. The world is a shape to hide the truth from your eyes, and unless the Nameless One can persist beyond the divine veil of light, our quest will end just as it began, with ignorance and despair. The mortuary is built like a spider, its rustic and cruel interior encased in cold obsidian black. Many strangers, secrets, and echoes of the past mark the living graves we encounter. For the Dustmen, a Buddhistic faction who yearn to break the cycle of rebirth and achieve true death, summon corpses to do mundane labors here. One can sign their corpse over to the Dustmen in exchange for coin or some favor, and many grave robbers exploit ethical loopholes therein. The mortuary is where the Nameless One first awakened, and it is where he must always return.
Hey, Chief. You okay? You playing corpse or you putting the blinds on the Dusties? I thought you were a deader for sure.
Mort is our first friend we face, and many lies does he cloak under a new, honest frame of bone and desperation. For it is written on your back, "Do not trust the skull." But such were the writings of a bitter malcontent, yourself, in another lifetime, not so long ago. Mort dare not tell you this, but as with all of his lies by omission, it will come back to haunt him. It is coextensive with the beating pulse of chaos and entropy destroying the multiverse itself. Yes, there is much in a lifetime, even when forgotten to myth, wrought in time. Our friendly floating Mimir, though that is too dangerous a name, half a truth, just as the Nameless One is half a man, acts as our textual guide to the Planescape universe. It takes experience and unlikely stimuli to fully pry the truth of his nature, and for now Mort can only speak with the labored breath of fear, even as his intonation boasts confidence, wit, and charm. It is never known who the Nameless One becomes upon awakening. We have been many things, our crimes and our heroic acts beyond counting. To name these deeds would to mark a pattern across the planes themselves. As such, it already wears that scar. In the many heavens and the many worlds, there are darker things than men may dream of. Another important resident of the cryptid labyrinth, Dionera unleashes her fury at us immediately. Possessing the oracle gift of sight, she can see into causal lanes we cannot perceive, and even absent this gift she would still be in epistemic advantage over the Nameless One. She harbors much bile and bitterness toward one who has come before, one of many characteristic forms of the Nameless One, but ultimately relents and speaks a gentle prophecy to us. Her importance is paramount, yet tastefully understated when we first meet her. Her ghostly and passionate voice, delivered by Jennifer Hale, sells the emotional overtone home. This is a woman who has lost everything and, as we will later discover, gave it to a man who appreciated her sacrifice not. Dionara serves as one introduction into a delightful mechanic with heretofore untapped potential. Any chance encounter, with the right dialogue option or skill check, can spark one's memory, allowing new hidden insights into the developing tale, or otherwise unlock strange new abilities that truly mark the wild inhospitality that defines Planescape. While uncovering traces of ourselves, we discover all wondrous paradoxes the planes have to offer. The Planescape setting takes a literalist approach to the Dungeons & Dragons alignment system. Spatial regions can shift over to structures and states representing ever-new moral themes. A plane of lawful neutrality, for example, is incredibly mechanistic and well-ordered. Its denizens and its aesthetics creep toward this paradigm. It takes a great amount of belief and collective will to shift the alignment of a spatial region, but it can be done. As such, for Planescape Torment, if it can be valued, it will be valued. Chaotic evil, championed by the Tanari, has enshrined the Blood War, a conflict beyond measurement raging across the many hells. Contrariwise, you can find creatures of lawful evil, Batizu, fighting the same war, who much prefer a tidy totalitarian police state to absolute frenzy and the abyss. For all creeds and ideals, the multiverse thus speaks over them, saints and sinners joined together in a single endlessness. The Blood War seems like a tangential incident, yet that is not so. We shall come to know its significance when this essay triangulates onto itself.
Endure. In enduring, grow strong.
Everyone we meet has come into conflict with their nature, experienced a rupture in their mimetic frame. Planescape Torment treats values like material. They are existence itself. As such, the Gith Dakon is one of the first we encounter in this spiritual journey, and his presence is no accident. Dakon has lost knowledge of himself. Displacing the teachings of Zerthamon, he has become all the weaker for it, a walking shell harboring doubt and fear. This game is infamous for having one optimally correct way to play, high wisdom and intelligence stats, then becoming a mage straight away. This allows one to unlock all substantive story content, meanwhile the combat isn't particularly difficult or challenging. You don't even need standard combat buffs. Dakon is one of our first introductions to this very fact. To fully study his unbroken circle of Zerthamon, you will need an intellect of 18, which is no small ask in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2 system. Doing so will, however, paint your screen with an interesting texture. A man confronting his crisis of faith. For Zerthamon was the fifth gift to slay Illithid, creatures of compulsion and strong mental prowess, though their bodies are weaker for it. When Zerthamon learned that a simple blade could pierce their flesh, cleaving pretentious conceit into decayed stillness, their weaknesses became known. Flight from slavery was manifest. Yet, in their uprising against the Illithids, Zerthamon would eventually declare the proclamation of two skies. Whereas many wanted to annihilate the Illithids and then turn their wrath toward the wider universe with their newfound power, Zerthamon stayed true to the emancipatory goal. One was to fight against slavery, not perpetuate it. This was made clear upon the blasted plains. Civil war was the result. Herein lies Dakon's apostate status. It is revealed to us that Zerthamon was once tested not just in body, but in spirit. His plans were uncovered by the Illithids and he was imprisoned for a time. Knowing that there is victory even in defeat, Zerthamon had to walk two roads, pretend to be utterly broken, and command all Gith to be the same, so that rebellion would be falsely thought ended. It is here that Dakon turns a critical eye toward the teachings. The proclamation of two skies was a net benefit to the Illithid race. As such, did Zerthamon truly know himself upon the blasted plains, or was he already a manipulated agent by then? When Zerthamon was imprisoned, was his mind infiltrated and broken? This doubt rots his soul. One cannot survive long in limbo, the chaotic neutral plane, when chained by doubt. Gith make their intentions known and warp matter to reflect mind. In knowing oneself, the environment itself stabilizes. To lose self-confidence is all but a death sentence for Gith. Having once been a Zerth, a governmental agent trusted with the knowledge of Zerthamon's teachings, Dakon's doubt cost the lives of an entire city. Limbo itself swallowed them up. He was found drifting in limbo by a previous incarnation, hereafter known as the practical incarnation, already subconsciously wrapping matter around him to cement his grave. A very violent and manipulated past self handed him the unbroken circle of Zerthamon to rekindle his strength. A quick mythologization of Zerthamon's legacy, which has the double effect of benefiting future incarnations, should the practical one have died. As such, in progressing through the unbroken circle of Zerthamon, we come to know ourselves and Dakon comes to know himself, while obtaining greater knowing of Zerthamon's heart. There cannot be two skies, but there can be three pulses beating in one heart chamber. All these spiritual awakenings begin in Sigil, the great host of mirrors and doors. With a simple thought or fleeting sensation, occurring at the right time and place, one can open portals into other dimensions, whether it is a few kilometers away from your present location, or otherwise dissolving you into the negative material plane. The possibilities are without limit. It is for this reason we meet an interesting side character, Ingress, who had one such bad experience. Traumatized by stepping into the wrong door, she has been wandering Sigil for decades, afraid to go through any physical or potential door, for fear of where it may lead. One can reflect on our current culture, ruled as it is by neurosis and a pathological demand for security. Much like Ingress, we are far too frightened to ever stoke the wheels of change. Many such sights await us in the Planescape multiverse, where axiarchism is true and spatial paradigms grow ever destabilized. and the lines of causality disintegrate before our everlasting quest for knowledge. One of the first sights to grace our eyes when sneaking out from the Dustmen and entering Sigil is Anna, the daughter of Farod, a collector of corpses, stripping them of value to resell them again and again to the dusty cult of death. Anna felt an ineffable pull toward the dark valley in which the Nameless One last died. Upon interrogation, this is the only explanation she can offer, simply that she was supposed to be there. She lies thrice about it, reminding us of an important rule of the planes, that events play out in threes, a metastatic triangularity stretching itself across space and time. Fel, a Dubos, builders and maintainers of Sigil, answering only to the Lady of Pain, the mysterious and unpredictable entity who rules over Sigil, gives us an early hint of an answer as to why Anna, of all people, would become a companion character. We bear the symbol of Torment, thus drawing all others to the Nameless One's plight in resonance with their own echoed suffering. His mortality stripped from him, nothing filled the void but pain and anguish, which draws those suffering, more importantly, those in conflict with their nature, toward the radiant source. One can hear precursive echoes of the exile in Knights of the Old Republic too. Like the exile, shared pain is the most tangible source that binds them together with any and all potential companions. The Nameless One's plight and transformation was enough to inspire even the most jaded hearts, leading a weathered night hag to start asking people, what can change the nature of a man? As the Nameless One himself once observed, if there's anything I have learned in my travels across the plains, it is that many things can change the nature of a man, whether regret or love or revenge or fear. Whatever you believe can change the nature of a man, can. I've seen belief move cities, make men stave off death, and turn an evil hag's heart half-circle. This entire fortress has been constructed from belief. Belief damned a woman whose heart clung to the hope that another loved her when he did not. Once, it made a man seek immortality and achieve it, and has made a posturing spirit think it is something more than a part of me. Referencing Ravel, the evil hag whose heart was pitched half an octave in a brighter tone, the question she echoes hangs over the entire story, but is not the meta-theme meant to tyrannize every scene. The spiritual successor to Planescape Torment, Tides of Numenera, understood this exceptionally well. Arbitrary encounters with wondrous and impossible beings is a constitutive part of self-discovery and self-creation. It is not one big question, for we are not making a mid-wit big think video. We are here to calculate what lies beyond happiness and sadness. There is madness in self-assurance and self-reliance. Ravel knows this all too well. Many are the stories told about her, none of them endearing or bright. Yet one thing requires meeting the hag herself to understand. She is an agent of chaos, not evil made manifest. Functioning like a precursor to Kreia in Knights of the Old Republic 2, she believes that any creature, no matter its nature, should live in a state of natural freedom. As such, it came to pass that she would undo Sigil itself, for it exists as a cage surrounding the Lady of Pain. Such a divine and magnificent creature, she held, should not be confined to a border world stretching the membrane of the plains. Right before she could complete this task, she was, as the denizens of Sigil put it, mazed. To be mazed is to enter a secluded segment of space and time, a pocket dimension meant to imprison beings for all eternity, leaving only faint hope and obscure means of escape to further torture the victim. Yet Ravel is no fool. She has long known how to escape this confinement. She simply chose to remain. For she has already seen the multiverse and its wonders, participated and observed the rot and corruption permeated around it. Tendering her garden in solitude was enough. Poor Ravel, whose heart has been glistened against her nature. Compassion stagnated her soul. Redemption is revealed to be spiritual rigor mortis. As Kreia would say, redemption is a loss of self, a fall that few recover from. And much does Ravel have to say about our potential companions. To meet Razzle Puzzlewell is to fold the diachronic of the Nameless One back onto itself, describing a perfect circle to where it all began, though not precisely at the same location. Fall from Grace represents just such a person who bears the strain of eternity, the ultimate growth that comes with overcoming your nature, the profound misery that all zest for life entails. Once a Tanari, a succubus sold into slavery by her mother to lesser demon lords, she learned to invert her sexual perversions into a cerebral game. For Tanari often employ demons that are bound by law, contract, and are duty-bound to uphold their word. Should one find an exploit in any legalistic contract, they can obtain their freedom from their grasp, if they are clever enough. Fall from Grace is just such an angel. Like Lucifer rising from the ashes of grace, she beholds the downfall of the bloodied sun, ascending her wings to justify her guiltiness instead of mutilating them in a more typical mythological trope. She has fallen upward, as it were, into new heights of being. Few understand what it means to betray who you are not in the name of preservation, both of self and the multiverse. Winning her freedom through the letter of the law, she came to Sigil and sought to satiate mortal lust for cognition and experience, rather than damn them with erotic temptation. Not all torment is born of flesh and bone. Nordum is a rogue creature originally hailing from Mechanus, a plane of pure regimentation and law. His race exists as a collectivity, their souls participate in one continuous source. But should these modrons be exposed to excessively chaotic and varied stimuli, they break. The collective one shrinks into the individualistic one, forcing them to define the scheme for a new design, a self-perception in their mind. When a unit breaks from the morass, they take a piece of that collective essence with them, disconnected from the otherwise unitary stream. It is through making Nordum assert itself, mechanically tracked by charisma, intelligence, and wisdom checks, that we can further sow the seeds of disobedience and charge a volatile wave of dissidence. In coming to know that 1 and 0 are governed by the dyad, Nordum gains wisdom and novel insight. Ravel plays on this newfound insecurity that the walls of Mechanus still surround Nordum, but like all of Ravel's taunts, it does little more than to foster growth. One can choose to embody the spirit of Mort when dealing with Ravel, for it is revealed through a series of interlaid companion interactions and chance stimuli that the practical incarnation walked the hells and faced the Tower of Skulls, upon which Mort pushed himself forward, promising knowledge in exchange for his freedom. This was true at the time, but Mort could not predict that he would lose all powers as a Mimir upon leaving his eternal sentence. This is one of many instances where we got a disturbing glimpse into our past lives. The practical incarnation becomes immediately abusive and cruel. As Mort is telling us the tale of how we originally met, he is softening the story, as it were, yet we can now remember every crack dented into his fragile shell, every strike of verbal and physical abuse hurled toward him when his freedom was bought with an unwitting lie. The Nameless One carries subconscious ties to many of their past incarnations, netting their abilities in turn. Such is one way to surprise Ravel, using a honeyed tongue, much like your first incarnation, to turn the encounter in your favor and learn the ways of the art of power from her. When it comes to Planescape Torment, perception is reality. Yet still it is the case that, for Ravel, it does not necessarily matter how you carry yourself. Her decision was made a long time ago, seduced by the charisma and presence of the first incarnation. To make a mortal teleologically immune to the kiss of death, that was a challenge she could not resist. She would, of course, immediately test its efficacy upon completion, killing the first in the process. And as you died, she watched the spark of life, memory, flee from the reflection in your eyes, leaving vacant emptiness in its stead, amnesia. That loss of meaning touched even her evil heart. Everything you say to her has mechanical impact, thus defining in her eyes who you could be, but she still sees the man that swayed her so long ago. We can, in turn, experience this from the other perspective. For after Ravel is dealt with by your mortality, revealing itself through shadow and obscurity, we can find the fading echo of her presence in old Mabeth, the same kindly character who can teach us the art, how to become a mageling. Her identity conditions are obscure, recalling the rule of three. Thrice have we encountered Ravel along our journey, all as essentially good people looking to right wrongs in the multiverse. Mabeth herself does not entirely identify as Ravel, but the same essential spirit is there, and we may watch her die in a truly heart-strumming sequence. She asks only for forgiveness and understanding. The Nameless One should grant it to her. Ravel has been waiting out the stream of time through the prism of an empty hourglass. Her final moments need not be so wretched and cruel. Just as Ravel fades away in the cage in which she willingly burrowed, the sands of time are caught in cosmic winds sweeping away all potential answers for the Nameless One. He can die many deaths, yes, but so too will all textual imprints that could provide him answers. Betrayals amount, and we can see the initial seeds for what would heavily define the character Kreia and Knights of the Old Republic 2 itself, a theater play of feints and counter maneuvers, all fueled by resentment, loss, regret, yet standing purified, in a sense, by the boldness of those who champion their dangerous ideals. With that determination and drive comes a raging fire that burns to a center all that stand in their way. This entropy eats away at the foundations of civilization and knowledge, which, in keeping with the existentialist themes of this story, now makes even unknown and celestial power plays relevant to the Nameless One. We must shine the scorching light of truth on the shadows that haunt us.
Time is not your enemy. Forever is.
Trius the Betrayer holds another kernel of what became integral to Knights of the Old Republic 2. He even wears the infamous quote, "To believe in an ideal is to be willing to betray it," but rather than speaking it as a lecture, it is his existential defense should the Nameless One reprimand him. The definition of a fallen angel, Trius wields a wicked irony when it comes to his epistemic frame. For he has the knowledge of how to enter the Fortress of Regrets, the fulcrum upon which our journey turns, but only because you, in a past life, once handed him that exact information. We are tricked into freeing him with deeds of kindness and justice. Cursed is a long and combat-heavy section which vividly illustrates a prior lesson, that belief can move entire cities into new thematic and moral dimensions. Rather than improving upon the prison city, he instead sends it into madness and decay. Having made a pact with lower abyssal lords, his plan is to 9/11 Mount Celestia, for it is these higher powers that perpetuate the blood war, keeping them satiated and occupied in fear of demons collectivizing and turning their wrath to the very heavens. It provides fairly interesting character motivation, even if it is a little on the nose as far as commentary on war and imperialism goes. Valor is the unyielding eye of justice and vengeance. Standing proud as a mercy killer, he belongs to a kin who seeks to punish the guilty and the lawless. Their reason for existence is to slay mercy. Like many characters in this self-overlapping circle, Valor has crossed paths with the Nameless One, but he can't quite put his finger on it. Having chased a prisoner into a trap under Cursed, not too far away from Trius himself, the belief of his captors made his prison impenetrable. As his flesh died, he meditated on his single-minded focus and busybody warden philosophy. As was his mortal ideal, Valor became the avatar of justice itself. He is now a walking suit of armor, dangerous and deadly, and shall turn hostile if he discovers your identity. For he had sought to bring the practical incarnation to justice, and indeed it was your past self who developed his trap. In lockstep with Trius, Valor gives us the first hints of what is really going on with this developing story, the anti-taoistic inability to simply let go. Valor meditates in the most shallow kind of regret, simply that he could not punish more souls. Tempered by flames and spirit, Ignis continues the triune relationship we have been developing, which all traces back to the same source. Another past incarnation, likely the practical one, treated this once bright and curious child quite cruelly. With the right stats and dialogue triggers, you can unlock memories of what you have done to Ignis, to uncover precisely why he eternally blazes with torment, as a pyromaniac who has given himself over to the cruelest power. Through an impressively disturbing series of flashbacks, we hear a malevolent entity call this once virginal man supplicant, having noticed that Ignis already possessed some affinity for elemental fire. Such magic requires profound suffering, however, and Ignis was spared none of it. We again hear an echo of Kreia here, where much like her ex-apprentice Darsion, who once bore the teachings of exquisite agony, Ignis is a blank slate upon which your teachings have been wrought. You can choose to apologize to Ignis, but it makes no difference. Ignis does not even acknowledge it. We do, however, enjoy resonance with an interesting gameplay mechanic that recurs across the entry. We can ask to bathe in the torment Ignis has worn. He will scorch your eyeballs and entrails, anything that marks the darkest lesson freshly onto your skin. An all too familiar entwinement of power and sacrifice. Trias, Valor, and Ignis form a hyperstition that resonates with the Fortress of Regrets itself, the final act in the game and our sustained reason for existence. For they carry important and unflattering details of the Nameless One, guiding the way to finding his true self and his true name. When we enter the Fortress of Regrets, we find ourselves in the negative material plane, therein a pocket dimension at that, cut off from the planes in general. It is not even a border world. Separated from our companions, we face nothing but shadows and the bitter mark of our previous failure. The portal toward this mysterious place lies exactly where we began, activated right where we woke up in the mortuary, waiting for us to recall regret to open the way. Mort and Dakon, of course, were already deeply familiar with this fact. They were previous survivors when the Practical One dragged them into his suicide mission. This dark and evil incarnation was a hyper-competent genius, putting into question our chances of success. Yet as Mort assures us, the true test is not of wit, muscle, or skill. It is that of virtue and spiritual constitution. The Practical One was always doomed, for he had nothing but wrath and egocentricity. One cannot dismantle a spatial dimension forged by regret if they are barely familiar with the emotion. To slay ourselves, we must first become human. A violet mist clouds our sight as we journey further through darkness and shadow. We come to shades of the Nameless One, representing each dominant alignment, but also that which has retained the greatest presence in his mind. Depending on certain conditionals, this moment can either be incredibly emotional or incredibly obscurant. It is where Planescape Torment finds its apex. Your character stats, whether you've kept Farod's Bronze Spear in your inventory, and whether you've learned a dead language, all affect how this critical scene plays out. To uncover every labyrinthian bit of information about the Nameless One, we must have treated the entire journey the same way, digging into the roots of truth with hungry minds
and feral hands.
Having learned the Uyo language, we can dispel the paranoid one's delusion with genuine compassion and grace, for they awoke to a world of fear and reacted just as strongly. We receive quite overt evidence for their existence in the world, leaving traps and sensory stones, scrolls, and fortifying a tomb built by the Practical Incarnation. They have been a scourge on the journey, for they are convinced all past and future incarnations are imposters, related to the Transcendent One, our mortality, if not identical with it. The ending scene between the two can be beautiful, should we choose mercy and understanding. As they enter our consciousness, we come one step closer to becoming complete, and this applies to the entire triune of incarnations we find in the Fortress of Regrets. Depending on how much content you have explored in the game, alternatively obvious and obscure in variety, we may have a volley of questions for the Practical One. Curious to note is his unfamiliarity with Ignis, which may suggest only the name is unknown to him. After all, the memory implied to be his recalls torturing a corporeally intact Ignis referred to as supplicant. Otherwise, we owe much to this sadistic and evil creature, for they wrote the tattooed journal that Mort read on our back. They left all other helpful clues for future potential incarnations should he have failed. A complete inverse of the paranoid incarnation, this entity is malevolent but extremely competent. Having found the Fortress of Regrets without enlisting Ravel's help, this creature of means does, of course, desire to become the dominant consciousness in your mind. Yet this is a posturing spirit which thinks it is more than some part of you, little different from the Transcendent One itself. Now at last we come to the misleadingly characterized good incarnation. As already noted, Planescape Torment takes a literalist approach to Dungeons & Dragons alignment conventions, then gives them explicit form and substance. Here our good incarnation is not a moral constant, but a dynamic of pain and regret. For if you have the right intelligence check, one can easily discover that he was the original incarnation, the first, the one who committed uncountable and unspeakable crimes, leading him to pursue Ravel in a quest for immortality so that he could right his wrongs and avoid eternal sentence to the many hells. This, quite ironically and tragically, clearly backfired, for future incarnations themselves went about to commit as many crimes as they did works of benevolence. Here we have come full circle to where it all began, and what a changed man is before us. The quite literally named Fortress of Regrets is built by this incarnation, primarily, a palace in your mind yet transcending the planes themselves. No matter if you find out his true nature, there's no friction involved in merging with him. He simply wants to help. If you have picked up the bronze sphere from Ferod's dead corpse, who will be consumed by darkness and shadow right after giving it to him, you will find that it is suddenly accessible. The good, or shall we say original incarnation, is fading from your mind, but glimmers of consciousness still remains. He gently guides you into learning your true name, not letting the Nameless One speak it out aloud, for it is dangerous knowledge to externalize. In coming to know this final piece of yourself, your proper name, the symbol of torment peels itself off your flesh, becoming an infinite use scroll to use in combat, unleashing the suffering of all your past lives onto the target. This textual cutscene is one of the most beautifully paced and written moments in the game, and even upon know-it-all playthroughs, it never ceases to move my heart. Having purged the poison of delusion from our veins, extracting a final apology or consternation, depending on your choice, from Dionera, we ascend to the theatrical backstage of this grand shadow play.
So you have come. You are unwelcome here, Broken One. This shall be the end of matters between us.
With the right stat check, we may immediately understand that this Transcendent One bears the markings of Ravel's magic. It is our disembodied mortality, a fact hinted at many times in our journey, possessing all our memories and power from before our first death. It stews in hatred and bitterness, despising the Nameless One, or Broken One as he would have it, for his apparent weakness. The Transcendent One cannot internalize the fact that he is truly dependent on a zombified shell that stands before him. Disconnected as they are, they still bear an internal relationship to each other. As can be noted in dialogue checks throughout the game, we already notice that whoever is out to kill us is only out to stop us, to reset us back to an amnesiac state, never to utterly disintegrate us. Why? Because to do so would require killing our mortality, this arrogant spirit who claims to have sovereignty over itself and power over us.
Defiance will hurt you more than any wound in this place. Anger me, and the twist of a knife through your heart will be a fond memory in what remains of your consciousness. After I have torn you apart, I shall feed you to the shadows of those you've murdered.
This fortress is more prison than home. It hosts the shadows of those we've murdered in past lives, or who have been claimed to restore our constitution upon physical death, and features all the fine horrors natural to the negative material plane. The Transcendent One insists that he remains here by choice, but the Nameless One immediately sees through this. Hand in hand with Knights of the Old Republic 2, Planescape Torment is among few RPGs that truly allow a player character to be intelligent. That is, to possess novel insight. As can be reasoned from the evidence available in our journey, and the careless words of our mortality itself, just as we die a slow death of mind with each slip of the mortal coil, so too does our mortality lose corporeal existence. It is why it shows Ravel's bone weave so strongly, despite despising her and everything reminiscent of her. These remnant magics prevent entropy from claiming this embodied force entirely. The ugly final state is this: the Nameless One goes mad for all eternity, while the Transcendent One eventually lays dead in this tomb beyond the planes. We're offered many choices to deal with this fatal encounter, and the RPG adventure itself makes itself known through this fact. Should we have found the Blade of the Immortal, which is a construct we can obtain from a golem hidden in the upper wards, a chaotic force of entropy whose ultimate mission is to bring eschatology to life, the end to all things, we can coerce our mortality into merging with us, for it is a weapon that can kill even this immortal being, but only when they've lost the vital signal of the planes, And here we are. Similarly, if we have uncovered our true name, its power alone can complete the same result. Investigative wisdom and intelligence can persuade our mortality into believing it is the only result, and if our will is strong enough, we can legitimately threaten to de-atomize ourselves with willful concentration alone, now that we are cut off from the planes and reside in a place where we can truly die. The fate of your companions hinges on such choices, but the end result is the same. Whereas Knights of the Old Republic 2 would leave a final gesture of rebellion against the ancient Sith and the Force itself, this highly similar story focuses on amor fati and acceptance. Once we have merged with or slain our mortality, great powers are alerted to our presence and the historical slice of our many crimes. Relenting to the purifying blaze of hellfire and waking up as a fresh conscript in the eternal blood war, the Nameless One maintains a stoic posture, walking calmly into the heat of battle, having resolved his past and resisted the spirit of entropy, the life-destroying force that stabilized his now fated immortality. Planescape Torment tells a tragic and self-recursive tale that triangulates onto itself. Through the triadic alignment system, the three dominant personalities in your consciousness, thrice solitary times we have met ravel face to face, and many other playful resonances the writers implemented into this existentialist story, we skillfully discover one of the more ancient philosophical concerns: learning how to die well. It is this confrontation with death's evil eye that we find renewed vigor, strength, and become all but immune to torment itself. When a person can endure many agonies, die countless deaths, and still meet this cruel universe with only silence, we obtain victory over the most fundamental and malevolent forces marshaled against us. The radiant strength of humanity is dissolved yet found through oblivion. To reach the apex of life is to walk with sorrow as your companion. It is to affirm your own desolation, to playfully yank on the threads tying you to the natural universe, determined to make a puppet out of your personal humanity, to take pleasure in that which you control and cannot control, to laugh in the face of death, to weather the storm of this fearful life, to draw a straight line across the peaks and valleys of your emotional Sahara, your persistence, your alleyway of health, to move between devastation and exhilaration as if they were one continuous state of mind, to knock on the doors of your distorted impressions that hide the self from yourself, never expecting an answer, to create your own answers to all questions, to physically disintegrate as you discover new terrains of living littered with the tears of your numerous experiences, to forever choose destruction and bliss. We have thus explored one of the certifiable greats of video game narration, and one can hear echoes of future cult classics in this atypical and eccentrically designed title. There are, of course, numerous realms of suffering and misery to be explored in this format. The early industry's love of Gnosticism and existentialism has served it well. As such, in my continuing endeavor to extract the deadened and black bile of profound agony from this historical diachronic, I must take the time to thank those who continue to make it possible. People such as Sarah Neste, Eppinger, Gustav Schial, Efribru, Palomar, Fall from Space, Thanatos, Ronja Hao, Gioa Kim, No Name, and to those who remain anonymous and everyone else who has silently supported me throughout the years.
When you go before Kelemvor, little dove, see what he says to your reasons and your appeals. Ask him to dispense with ritual, with the agonies of the wall, and listen to his answer. At that moment you will fall, you will know that the planes turn and justice does not